The first signs of trouble came not in places where you would expect it, but in forests that looked absolutely pristine. Scientists working in Ecuador's Yasuni Biosphere Reserve noticed something strange during their morning surveys. Bette Loisel and John Blake, researchers who had spent years documenting birds in this corner of the Amazon, realized the dawn chorus was growing quieter. During unusually rainy seasons, fewer birds were singing at sunrise. Species they once counted on seeing regularly, like the wedge-billed woodcreeper and blue-crowned manakin, were becoming harder to find. This was not supposed to happen. Yasuni is one of the most biodiverse places on Earth, a protected reserve where the forest canopy stretches unbroken in every direction. There were no fires burning through the understory, no chainsaws roaring in the distance, no bulldozers clearing land for cattle or soy. Yet the birds were disappearing. The same pattern emerged in other protected areas across the tropics. In Panama, researchers working in Parque Nacional Soberania documented steep declines in understory birds over decades of careful monitoring. In Brazil, near Manaus, the biological dynamics of forest fragments project revealed similar losses in forest that had never been logged or fragmented. These were places where conservation efforts had seemingly succeeded. The forest looked healthy, the trees were tall, the canopy was intact. But something was wrong. This is the paradox that scientists are now racing to understand. Birds are vanishing from forests that appear completely untouched by human hands. The usual culprits, habitat destruction and fragmentation, cannot explain what is happening here. Something else is driving these declines, something invisible and insidious that reaches deep into protected areas and pulls birds from the landscape, one species at a time. The numbers make it impossible to dismiss what is happening as coincidence or natural fluctuation. In Ecuador, researchers documented a 40% decline in mist net captures between 2001 and 2014. Systematic surveys showed an even steeper drop, 50% over the same period. These are not impressions or hunches, they are counted birds recorded methodically year after year using the same techniques in the same places. John Blake has spent decades doing this work. He remembers when a 15-minute bird count meant tallying 20 or 30 species, a flurry of calls and movement that kept him constantly writing. Now, the same exercise yields 2 or 3 species. If he is lucky, the forest has gone quiet in a way that decades of experience tell him is deeply wrong. Panama tells the same story. In Parque Nacional Soberania, researchers have run mist net lines since the late 1960s. Decades of consistent monitoring in protected forest revealed severe declines across dozens of understory bird species. These are birds that spend their entire lives in the dimly lit lower reaches of the forest. They should be stable, the habitat is protected, the forest looks intact, yet the numbers show something is very wrong. What makes these findings so alarming is their consistency. Different countries, different research teams, different methods, all pointing toward the same conclusion. The birds are disappearing from places that appear completely undisturbed, and the data proves it is happening on a scale that cannot be ignored. When scientists looked closely at which birds were disappearing, a clear pattern emerged. The losses were not random, they were concentrated among certain types of birds, and understanding who was vanishing revealed something important about what might be going wrong in these forests. Insectivores have been hit hardest. These are birds that make their living catching insects, and they include many of the species that have shown the steepest declines among them. Ground-dwelling insectivores stand out as particularly vulnerable. The rufous-capped antthrush and the black-tailed leaf-tosser both forage on the forest floor, scratching through leaf litter in search of beetles, ants, and other prey. These birds have become increasingly difficult to find, but the losses extend beyond the forest floor. The musician wren, known for its beautiful flute-like song that once commonly greeted the dawn, has become rare. Researchers now go days without hearing a sound that used to be a familiar part of the jungle soundscape. The wedge-billed woodcreeper, which climbs tree trunks probing bark for insects, has also dwindled in numbers. So has the blue-crowned manakin, a small bird that feeds on both insects and fruit. Even the white-throated toucan, a larger bird that more people might recognize, has become less common. What ties many of these species together is their feeding ecology. Insectivores tend to be specialists. They have evolved to exploit specific food sources in specific ways. Some probe into bark, others scratch through leaves. Many follow army ant swarms to catch fleeing insects. This specialization makes them efficient at what they do, but it also makes them vulnerable. When something in their environment changes, they cannot easily switch to new food sources or new ways of feeding. When their particular niche is disrupted, they have few options for survival. The assumption behind protected areas seems straightforward enough. Draw a boundary around a forest, keep out the chainsaws and bulldozers, and the wildlife inside will be safe. But research from Panama is revealing just how flawed that assumption can be. Park National Soberania covers roughly 22,000 hectares in central Panama, and within its boundaries sits a research site that has been monitored since the late 1960s. The forest here is old secondary growth trees that have been regenerating for more than a century on paper. This place should be thriving. No significant deforestation has occurred within the reserve since monitoring began, yet when scientists looked more closely at what had changed, the picture became more complicated. Consider Pipeline Road, which cuts through the study area. In the early years of the study, this was a paved road maintained as a wide open corridor. A strip of low second-growth vegetation stretched about 25 meters on either side, creating edge habitat that supported certain bird species adapted to more open conditions. Then, in 1980, the area received official protection as a national park. Maintenance stopped. The paved road became a narrow dirt track, barely 5 meters wide. The second growth buffer grew up and closed into mature forest canopy. The edge habitat simply vanished. From a conservation perspective, this sounds like progress, more forest, less disturbance. But for birds that relied on those edge habitats, it meant losing a home, and the changes did not stop at the reserve's boundaries. Deforestation and development have severed connections to higher elevation forests to the east, places like Cerro Jif and Cerro Azul. The links to wetter coastal forests to the north have also been cut. Birds that once moved between these different habitats now find themselves in fragments, unable to reach the places they need. Protection on a map does not guarantee stability on the ground. Forests can be officially safe while still undergoing profound transformation. The word protected, it turns out, does not mean unchanged. So what is actually driving these disappearances? The first real clue came from timing. When researchers looked back at their data, they noticed something striking. The initial drops in bird numbers in Ecuador coincided with an unusually intense La Niña event. This climate pattern brought far more rain than normal to the region. The forests were saturated, flooded in places for extended periods, and scientists wondered, could this extreme rainfall be the culprit? But here is where the story takes a darker turn. When La Niña faded and rainfall returned to normal levels, the bird populations did not recover. They kept declining. This told researchers that something more permanent had shifted. A single weather event might explain a temporary dip, but it cannot explain sustained losses over decades. Whatever started the decline, something else is keeping it going. This raises difficult questions for scientists trying to understand what is happening. Could rising temperatures be pushing birds beyond their physiological limits? Tropical birds have evolved in remarkably stable climates. They may lack the tolerance for temperature swings that temperate species handle routinely. Even small increases in heat could stress them in ways we cannot easily see. Then there is the food question. Shifting rainfall patterns might be disrupting the timing of fruit production and insect booms. If rains come early or late, fruits might not appear when birds need them most, and for insect eaters, this timing matters enormously. Many tropical birds time their breeding to coincide with peak insect abundance. If that peak shifts, they may struggle to find enough food exactly when they need it most. What makes this so much harder to investigate than deforestation is that climate operates invisibly. A bulldozed forest is obvious. You can see it, photograph it, measure it, but a temperature increase of 1 or 2 degrees leaves no visible scar. A shift in rainfall timing does not show up on satellite images. These changes ripple through ecosystems in ways that can take years or even decades to detect. By the time researchers notice, the birds are gone. The cause has become a ghost, nearly impossible to trace back to its source. Near Manaus, Brazil, a team of researchers is trying something that would have seemed absurd just a few decades ago. They are watering a rainforest. Stefano Avila and Jared Wolf, along with their colleagues, have set up an ambitious experiment in a patch of Amazon jungle. They are literally irrigating sections of the forest during dry periods, delivering supplemental water to see what happens to the birds living there. The logic is straightforward, even elegant. If drought stress is indeed driving these mysterious disappearances, then birds in the watered plots should survive better than those in unwatered areas. The supplemental irrigation should act as a buffer against the drying climate. But if the birds continue to decline even with extra water, then researchers will know they need to look elsewhere for the cause. Either way, the experiment promises answers. This is the scientific community racing to understand an unprecedented threat before more species slip away. The approach represents a shift from simply documenting losses to actively testing hypotheses about what is causing them. It is hands-on experimental ecology on a scale rarely attempted in tropical forests. More than 60 years ago, Rachel Carson warned that vanishing birds and insects were signals of deeper ecological collapse. Her book, Silent Spring, helped launch the modern environmental movement by showing that pesticide use was unraveling food webs. Today, researchers fear they are witnessing another silent spring in the making, but this time driven by climate change reaching into places once considered safe. The disappearance of birds from pristine forests may be telling us something profound about the health of these ecosystems, and the researchers watering the Amazon are trying to listen before the forest falls silent for good.